Okay, let's see how this works. Spanish. If you're going to live in Ecuador, you should know some Spanish. The more Spanish you know, the easier your life is going to be. Now, learning a new language for me, in high school I took French. I was not very good at it. It does, however, after 4 years of French, it does, however, catch in my head still. So I can be listening to someone speaking French and I will understand every third or fourth word. I will be able to sort of get along. But my experience learning French, and I also took 2 years of Russian. Once again, 1 out of 10 words, and it really depends on where the Russian speaker is from if I can understand them. But Spanish is different. So I have been learning Spanish terribly over 20 years with my wife. And she's very salty about how I have learned so little Spanish over that time. But in fairness, we lived in the United States. Every single day I'm speaking English all day long. I may speak a little bit of Spanish when I'm at home. But you tend to think in the language that you use daily. And even here in Ecuador, because I'm a remote worker to the United States, even here in Ecuador, I'm speaking English most of the time, and I default to it, and that's not a good idea, because there's things that I need to do here, like doing my visa, and even just going out to the mercado. I need to speak more Spanish. Now, it's really funny so I've lived here a few months now, and it is interesting when my wife is talking with someone. We get a lot of visitors here. Where I'm from, visitors don't just come over. Here in Ecuador, the visitors just come over. They can often come at very inconvenient times, but it is what it is, And I think it's kind of nice. It's kind of a throwback to maybe like the 50s or something. And anyway, when my wife is having these long, rather quick conversations, when I say quick, I mean she's speaking rapidly and they're speaking rapidly. I used to sit here and just be like, it's just television static, right? Just television static. I can't understand anything. But the more that I have learned and the more that I have tried, the more that I go to the mercado, the more that I have to know Spanish in order to just get along, telling the taxis where to go, answering questions at the mercado, talking to people about my visa, getting copies made, just like everyday stuff. The more I do that and the more I learn, the more this static starts to every once in a while have a voice, right? A word I understand, a meaning I understand. And I just realized the other day as we were talking to a visitor that I understood like 50% of what they said, even though they were speaking at a very rapid pace. The other problem that I have here when learning Spanish, and I'm not going to say this is all about problems. I'm going to talk about what I think is the best way to learn Spanish and what has really helped me out. But one of the problems I have is there's a lot of colloquialisms, slang, saying one thing but meaning something different. There's a lot of that. So some of the best ways, though, that I've been learning Spanish that have helped me out a lot, even though at the time they don't really feel like they're helping out a lot, is I try to watch news and YouTube videos in Spanish. Now, do I start out just in full Spanish? No, I didn't start out in full Spanish. I started out in English with Spanish subtitles, because for me, being able to read it links in my head somehow. If I can read the word, I can pronounce it. And I have a pronunciation problem here, which is weird because I'm really good at doing voices and accents and things like that. But I always seem to put emphasis on the wrong part of a word. So yeah, YouTube videos and news. I start out by watching them in English, but with Spanish subtitles. I do that with movies too. I watch movies with in English, but with Spanish subtitles. I think I'm close to graduating to movies in Spanish with English subtitles, or maybe no subtitles at all. Probably that would be the best, but I like to go slow, 20 years. She's very salty about that. What else? What else is a good thing to do is to put myself or to put yourself into situations where you have to learn Spanish, where you have to speak Spanish, whether you like it or not. Necessity forces us to learn. And so I put myself in situations where I need to say something. And if I don't know how to say it, I'm going to look it up on my phone. But you know what? I'm going to end up saying it so often. I'm going to end up doing it so often that it's just going to stick. Now in the Mercado, I feel really good about just walking up to, and obviously I know a lot of vendors in our Mercado now. I know a lot of people, and I joke with them, and it's nice. It's nice, and it relaxes me, and I can speak Spanish better. Here's something else we noticed: is when I drink, which is not very often, but when I drink, suddenly all of the Spanish that I have been learning over the several years, right, just sort of bubbles up. Like, I can just say all sorts of stuff. I can understand everything. It is crazy. So I know that part of my inability to learn Spanish faster is up here. It's a lie. It's all a lie inside my head. I am learning it. I'm just not allowing myself to believe it. Watching movies, watching videos. Another great way is, definitely take advantage of the language learning apps, right? Duolingo. I have friends here who use Duolingo to learn English, and he's got 900 days, I think, 900 day streak, which is like basically 3 years, right? So he's got like a 3-year streak on learning English, and his English is excellent. Like, he understands 98% of what I say. I understand 65% of what he says. Unless I'm drinking, then it's like 70. That's a boost. Use the language learning apps. And even though they're just ridiculous sometimes, and they have you go over the same stupid crap that you will never use. You will never talk about the biblioteca. You're never going to go to the library, okay? Or if you do, it's going to be a very rare occurrence, right? You'll talk about that. Plus, when you're learning Spanish, understand that it's even more so than English. When you're speaking English in the United States, there's 20 ways in the U.S. to speak English, and they're very different, and they have different forms of the same words, and so English can be difficult. Then you go over to Great Britain or the UK or something like that, right? And English is totally different there. With Spanish, it's even more so. Like, neighboring countries, sometimes you can't even understand from one to the other. Like, it's really difficult because they use different colloquialisms, they use different slang, they have very different accents, they speak at different speeds. So I really like that even though on Duolingo I'm learning Spanish, I still need more work talking to Ecuadorians, because Ecuadorians have a different way of talking. And on the coast compared to in the Sierra, totally different as well. I mean, not totally different, but different enough that I will miss things. I will miss things because I am learning coastal Ecuadorian Spanish. If I go to the Sierra, I'm going to have a hard time again, right? They also include the language, an indigenous language, I believe it's called Quechua. And so there's a lot of people in the Sierra, and there's even people here on the coast that very often, they'll throw in Quechua words, and throws me for a loop. Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Me and a taxi driver who only speaks Spanish, we had this long conversation about Quechua words. Some that I know, some that he knows. It was funny because how do you have a long conversation with someone and we don't speak each other's language? But it works. That's the other thing too, is that kind of trying. Like, I just want to communicate, and people aren't putting a lot of pressure on you. They're just trying to understand. It makes it a lot easier, and I learn a lot more when I'm in a situation like that. Like when I'm around our family, we have a large family here, and they have friends, and they have cousins and cousins of friends, and so you end up with this huge group of people in one place, and it's very helpful for me, honestly, is to listen to, like, I'm listening to other conversations. I'm trying to participate. If I don't understand, I can ask so and so, and then the younger people here. There's quite a few of them that are on their own, not even in a school or a classroom. They are going to the internet to learn English because it's a skill. I mean, it's a well-paying skill, honestly. And do I want to say that, oh, if you want to make money, you got to learn English? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that any skills that you have here can translate into providing for your family, and even more so than they do in the United States. So the other thing, so what else do I do to learn Spanish? I talk to my wife in Spanish, and she educates me all the time. She tells me when I've done something wrong. I get frustrated. She gets frustrated with me, especially with my pronunciation, because sometimes I'll say something like the name of a town, and she'll say, "Oh, by the way, this right here is what's making all the noise. If you can hear it." And she's got to sit on my lap. So yeah, speaking with my wife, and I know there's a lot of expats here who the way they learn Spanish is they hire someone and they basically pay them to have weekly conversations and to practice things weekly. So it's almost like having an app, but it's a live version and they're specific to what you want to learn. And my problem with that is I don't know if I'm the best judge of what I need to learn. So I leave it to my wife because she's really a good judge of that kind of thing. But yeah, I'm getting better. That television noise, that white noise, I'm starting to understand a huge amount of it. And I'm trying to speak more of it. And I know a bunch of words, especially when it comes to cooking. Something I haven't told everybody about me is that I love to cook. Right? I'm an IT guy, but in the house I love to cook, and that's probably why I've been fat for most of my life. But I love to cook, and so a huge number of my Spanish words that I recognize and I can speak and I can say have to do with cooking, food, ingredients, stuff like that. The hardest thing for me so far has been numbers. I am just now as of this week, really getting a grasp on numbers, which in the mercado is a serious problem. So what do I do in the mercado if I don't understand numbers? Is I just tell them, hey, give me 50 cents of that, give me $1 de plantains, $1 de plantains. See, that's the other thing too, is I go all Spanglish. It's not plantains, it's plátanos. And you can't even say plátanos here because there are so many different maturity levels of plantain. You have to know, you don't even have to say plátanos. If I want the greenest plantains, I would say verde, but there's apparently another secret word where it's even greener, like the greenest of green. And my wife has said it a couple of times, but I don't know the word. But if I'm going to go to the mercado and I'm going to order plantains, I'm going to say, $2 de plátanos verde. And they'll look at me funny because nobody says plátanos verde, they just say verdes. Or they say the middle range, which are pintón, where they're just turning over, they're just starting to ripen from green to yellow. And I mean, that's a one-day thing. You got to get those right away. So that would be pintons. And then there's maduros, the ones that are all the way over, or they're supposedly the most mature. And I think there's a word for the most mature too. Like they don't sell those in the mercado. You actually have to wait at your home for them to turn super maduro. Anyway, I'll do a whole thing on plantains because seriously, I could do a 2-hour video on plátanos. They are incredibly interesting and they are a staple food here. Anyway, this was not about cooking, Matt. focus. Okay, so Matt's focusing. Um, yeah, there are people here, there are Americans here, there are Canadians here who absolutely know almost no Spanish. Now, what's the downside of not knowing any Spanish here? Well, you're going to have to hire a translator for all sorts of stuff. Are they inexpensive? Sure. Does it provide jobs for Ecuadorians? Sure. Um, will it be hard to find someone you can trust? Not really. No. The expat forums are excellent for stuff like that. There's all sorts of expat forums and people who will help you find the right people. But for me, you're not always going to have a translator with you when you need to speak Spanish, when you need to be understood. Okay? And that happened to me when I got in my scooter accident. Okay? And I was able to communicate, but just barely. And I would have been in a much better spot, and I would have been more helpful to the people who helped me. And I'll talk more about that. I'm probably going to do a whole video on my scooter accident. I've mentioned it in my in my transportation video, but the people who helped me, who put me in the ambulance, the people in the ambulance, they were really, really helpful, just trying to communicate with me because they understood that, you know, I was stressed out, I was weirded out, and I lost a good amount of my Spanish just sitting there. And then I finally started coming back to me, and I was a little more helpful. But yeah, you should not live in a country that has a certain language as their primary language and not know it. That's just my rough and cruel way of saying, learn Spanish, damn it. But plus, you also get to experience this country in a much wider way by knowing Spanish. And people are much nicer to you when you try to say things in Spanish. There's people in the Mercado, like the gringo price that I used to pay in the Mercado has been lessening the more Spanish I speak. And I think that's mostly because I'm really trying and I'm a friendly guy. Anyway, that's where I am right now with learning Spanish. I'll probably do a deep dive on learning Spanish, and maybe bring some special Ecuadorian Spanish to everyone on the channel. Cool. So I will talk to you later. Have a great one.